Good morning, students. Happy Monday to you and welcome to our second week of distance learning. Last week we talked about adding and subtracting rational numbers. Now we're going to jump into multiplying and dividing rational numbers. So once again, just a little outline of things that you need to know and remember. We're going to talk about integers, and then we're going to continue using fractions and decimals in our lessons. So just a quick review on integers with multiplying. We've talked about adding and subtracting integers. Now let's talk about multiplying and dividing integers. Now the nice thing about multiplying and dividing with integers is you really need to remember only two things. Same signs, we get a positive answer. Different signs, we get a negative answer. So if we look over here, we have 3 times 6. Well, 3 times 6 is 18. I note I have the same signs, negative and negative, so I get a positive answer. 3 times 6 again, they're both positives. This is nothing new. We've been doing this since grade 2. 3 times 6 is 18. Here we have a positive times a negative, so we have different signs, so we get negative 18. And then over here, oh, I did that one twice. Well, good review. A negative times a negative, and we get a positive. Now let's up the difficulty level a little bit. Notice here we have 3 things that are being multiplied. So just follow BEDMAS. Think to yourself, what is 3 times 2? 3 times 2 is 6. We had a negative and a negative, same signs, so we would end up with a positive 6. And then we multiply by a positive 2, and we get 12. Over here, negative and a negative, 2 times 4 is 8. It was 2 negatives, same signs, so I end up with positive. But then I multiply by negative 1. I have a positive times a negative, different signs, so I get a negative answer. Over here, again, follow BEDMAS, do in the order you see because it's all multiplication. 3 times negative 3 gives me negative 9. Then I multiply by negative 2, and I get positive 18. Okay, so unfortunately, you're not going to be working with as easy of those numbers, but I just want to review same signs as positive, different signs as negative. So now let's jump into the main part of our lesson, finding products. So again, you should remember that products is when we are multiplying. When we are multiplying with fractions, our first step that we need to do is we need to change our mixed numbers into improper fractions. So again, we would do 4 times 1 is 4. Plus 1 more, so I have 5 parts. What kind of parts are they? I have 5/4. Then I multiply, same thing, change my mixed number into an improper fraction. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 more, and I get 7/3. Now don't make the mistake, that's very easy to make. Don't forget about that negative. Keep it in there. It's very easy to forget. Now we'll multiply the top and multiply the bottom. So 5 times 7 is 35. 4 times 3 is 12. Don't forget the negative. Oops, I should write an equal sign here. Don't forget the negative. So then we simplify that. I think how many times does 12 fit into 35? Again, if you need to do this on the side, that's fine. It fits in 2 whole times. And then I have 11 leftover pieces. So I get 11/12. And don't forget, it's still negative. Okay, so to review, first step is to switch it into an improper fraction. Then you multiply the top and the bottom, top and the bottom. Don't forget the negative sign needs to come with us because we went from a positive times a negative, a different sign, so I end up with negative, and then I simplify my answer. All right, let's try another one. So this is just a reminder over here, when we have brackets together, that means multiply. You're going to see that in your textbook, so I thought I would review that here. So we're still going to follow BEDMAS. This is multiplying. So multiplying, when it's all multiplying, you just do what you see first. Remember, I can cross cancel things. So I don't need to put these into improper fractions. They're already there, but I can cross cancel. 7 and 7 can both be divided by 7, and I get 1 and 1. So I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom. So I'm going to get 1 times 3 is 3, and 2 times 1 is 2. I had a negative times a positive, so this is going to end up as a negative. Then I'm going to multiply that, brackets around it if I want, by negative 2/3. Let's cross cancel. Cross cancel, cross cancel. I get a 1 and a 1, cross cancel, 1, 1. I end up with 1 over 1, which is really just 1. Check, is it positive or negative? Well, negative times a negative, same signs, so my answer is positive. Now remember, grade 7, if you forget to cross cancel or you choose not to cross cancel, that's totally fine. If I were to multiply the top, I would get 3 times 2, so I would get 6 over 6. And then I just have one more step at the end to simplify it to be 1. Okay, so if you forget to cross cancel, it's not a big deal. You'll still get the same answer. You just need to simplify at the end. All right, let's talk about quotients. So when you're working with quotients, so you're dividing things, you still follow the same steps that you do with multiplication. You need to make sure that what you're working with is already in fraction form. So 2 times 2 is 2. 2 times 2 is not 2. 2 times 2 is 4, and add 1 more, and I get 5 over 2. Now you remember from our first review lesson last week, Monday, when I'm dividing fractions, I actually multiply by the reciprocal. So my first one stays the same, 25 over 30. I change to multiplication, but that means I also change to the reciprocal. Reciprocal means I flip the top and the bottom. Once again, I have the opportunity to cross cancel. You don't have to, you just end up with bigger numbers at the end that you need to simplify, but I'm going to cross cancel because I can divide by 5 on both of these. And I'm going to cross cancel over here because I can divide by 2, and I would get 5/15. Now, you'll notice that I almost forget, and this is why it's always good to go back. I forgot in all of my steps to put the negative in here. This negative has not disappeared. So I actually end up with negative 5/15. Now I can simplify, and I get negative, well, I can divide both of them by 5, negative 1/3. Okay, so grade 7, it is very easy to forget about that negative. So if you're doing your marking from yesterday or from Friday, or you're doing your marking the next day, and you're like, oh, I got something wrong, make sure you didn't lose one of the negatives along the way. All right, last example for today, evaluating expressions. Remember, evaluating expressions just means we're given the information we need and we plug it in. So notice over here, we have B divided by C times A. I already wrote out the plug-in for you. So where there was B, I wrote 1/4 because that's how I was told up here. Same with C and A. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just deal with this bottom part first. So I have negative 3/5 times negative 1/2. So what do I end up with? I end up with, well, 3 times 1 is 3. 5 times 2 is 10. I asked myself, is it negative or positive? Positive. I have 2 negatives, same signs, it means it's positive. So now I have 1/4 divided by 3/10. So it might be helpful to write it out like this for you if you don't like that fraction bar. 1/4 divided by 3/10. My next thing that I can do is I need to multiply by the reciprocal. So 1/4 times 10 over 3. I can cross cancel if I want to, but I'm just not going to this time, just so you can see what I end up with. 1 times 10 is 10. 4 times 3 is 12. I can divide by 2 on both of those, so I would get 5/6 as my answer. Okay, so that's evaluating expressions. So don't be scared away by the fact that we're working with letters. Just make sure you plug in the information based on what you've been given. One more little reminder for today. You obviously have these videos to watch from me, but also in your textbook, if you are stuck, it does break down all the steps on how to do the questions on the left-hand side of your lesson. So don't forget that as a resource too. Perhaps after you've watched the video, you want to look at how it is written out in the book as well. All right, I will talk to you.